Hey, Mark Oldman here in New York City with a very special guest and a very special wine. My guest, Ben Downing, acclaimed biographer, editor, writer, show you his brand new book here, The Queen Bee of Tuscany. I've been reading about it in the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. I think it was the Washington Post that said, it is so amusing. He didn't even know where to start.
He did say that.
Yeah.
I was happy about
It's
that.
badass. That's really cool. So, in honor of you and the Queen Bee of Tuscany, your new book, I had to pick out a similarly prestigious wine, a Tuscan wine that kind of paid homage to your subject of the book. Because, and you're going to get into this, Janet Ross, who you wrote about.
That's right.
But I wanted to pick a wine that represented a Tuscan woman here. This is Le Pergole Torte, and this is a super Tuscan, meaning when it came out originally, it did not conform to the rules that would have allowed it to have the Chianti status. So it got branded with the Vinous dunce cap. It didn't get the prestigious Chianti Classico name, and now these days they don't even want it because it's so famous. And the reason why it didn't get the Chianti designation is because it's 100% Sangiovese. And back in the day, back in 77, 78, when the founder of this winery first brought this wine to market, you had to mix in a few white grapes with your red wine.
For it to count as Chianti.
Exactly.
Right.
And he was like, you know what? The wine will speak for itself. So he was a Tuscan rebel. And that leads us to Janet Ross in your great new book. So Janet was an unconventional figure for her time too.
She certainly was. She was part of what an interesting phenomenon back then that was known as the Anglo-Florentine colony, which was a group of English people and also Americans living in Florence at that time that grew as large as 30,000 people at one point in a small city of Florence, like 300,000, so about 10% of the population. And so she was part of this group in a way, but she also resisted the conventions of it.
So let's talk more about your book, but I'm just going to tell you that this wine, I know you like wine and I'm not going to pontificate, but Super Tuscans can be very blackcurranty and full-bodied, and some are really lush and rich on the palate. What's great about this one is it is more Burgundian, it's more elegant, it's more reserved. Pergole Torte, they really want the terroir or the place to speak. And you know, we were talking beforehand, you were actually in this town.
The town's called Radda in Chianti.
Radda.
Yes, I happened there. It's a beautiful place. I was there a couple years ago, just overnight. It's south of Florence, I don't know, an hour or something like that.
Right.
It's magnificent. Yeah.
And it's hilly,
It
so
is.
it's a little cooler up there, and the grapes produce a more refined wine. This is more like a Pinot Noir. Try it out and see what you think.
Very nice.
It's kind of has a savory, earthy smell to it, and the texture. I'm going to put you on the spot.
Can I say velvety?
That's pretty perfect. That's silky, velvety.
Or else silky. Silky was my second.
Yeah, well,
choice,
silky might be the lighter velvety. It's hard to parse.
It's not like
these
sandpaper.
distinctions. Right. So tell me, Ben, this Janet Ross you write about, she was an entertainer of sorts, yes?
She was a hostess. She was quite famous as a hostess. Yes. In fact, she's the author of the first Tuscan cookbook in English. Called Leaves from Our Tuscan Kitchen, published in 1899. Minor but recognized classic in cookbook history.
Well, and what sort of dishes there might have been?
Oh, well, there are odd sorts of things like cardoons, for instance. I can't even remember what a cardoon is. I'm embarrassed to say. It's some kind of vegetable. A lot of vegetables, actually, which was very unusual back then. This was at a time when English people ate boiled meat, basically. So,
right.
Yeah. And they made their own wine. Her estate.
Janet herself made the wine.
Yes, she was involved with it.
So in the book, there's a small passage that mentions that Janet actually stomped grapes herself.
She certainly did. She would love to be involved in what was called the vendemmia, which is the annual grape harvest, which was sort of a ritual occasion in Tuscany at that time. And there would be lots of singing and dancing and so forth, and lots of hard work too, of course. And they would bring in the grapes, and then everybody would take turns mashing them, rolling up their pants and getting in there and mashing around. And she would often invite friends of hers to come stay with her. It was sort of like what is now known as like an agriturismo holiday, where you get to go stay on a farm and take part in the farm life. But these people would do it for free because they were friends of hers.
How great is that? It's like a multifaceted guesting experience.
That's right, and the friends would take part in the vendemmia, in the grape harvest. So, for instance, at one point, her friend, the playwright Tom Taylor, who in fact wrote the play that Abraham Lincoln was watching the night he was shot, bad luck, but he was a very good friend of hers, and he would come with his family, and they would all stomp grapes and pick grapes with her and sing and all that. And so she made the grape harvest an occasion for not just revelry, but for including friends from abroad in the fun.
I love that. I also read in the book about how Mark Twain, among many kind of famous figures of the day, came to visit. What did you learn about Mark Twain writing this?
Well, he a little known part of his life that he lived in Florence for 9 months in the 1890s, and he lived just down the road from Janet Ross in a house that she found him to rent. And he spent a lot of time with her during the 9 months that they were there, and they became quite good friends. In his autobiography, which became a bestseller recently, he writes about her and what a wonderful friend she was, and how much fun he had at her house.
I was struck by the fact that Twain wasn't this kind of Tom Wolfian figure of
except for the white suit.
right. That's what I think of. But he was a little kind of rumpled and not ready for prime time.
He seems to have had a sort of endearing haplessness about him, based on what I read, that he would often in a state of some confusion. There's a very funny story, and I think in my book that I found. In fact, I found a report about this from the New York Times. That while Twain was in the area, he decided to shave off his hair. He's that famous mop of hair,
sure,
like Don King, and he was suddenly spotted bald as a billiard ball, and a New York Times reporter saw him in Florence and said, "My God, why have you shaved off your hair?" And he explained that it was because he really wanted to learn Italian, and he somehow thought that by shaving off his hair, that Italian words would penetrate into his brain more easily. And he told the same story to Janet Ross and her family. He came to their house one day and he was bald, and they said, "What's up?" And he said, "Well, I'm hoping that I can learn Italian faster by
expedite the process
without hair." So, as he noted in his diary, it didn't work. He was very bad at languages, unfortunately.
Ben, thank you so much for coming. I want to say that Ben's book is available. It's out there. It's getting all these critical accolades right now. I was just went to a signing, and it was standing room only. And so it's a great book for the rest of the fall to get you in that kind of Tuscan mindset. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
So Ben, you were doing some deep research in Florence, and I want to know a good expression, even better if it's a wine-related expression, you learned while you were doing your research.
Well, let me think. I know a good one that I find very amusing that I learned there, that does have to do with wine, which is basically the Italian equivalent of "you can't have your cake and eat it too." And it goes like this: non si può avere la botte piena e la moglie ubriaca. And what it says is that you can't have both a full cask and a drunk wife. So there you have it.
Boy, is that true.
Yes, alas.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Chin chin.